G'day guys and gal, I can comfortably say that out of all the original Space Marine legions, the Iron Hands get the least amount of love from the community. That's not unjustified. Their color scheme is bland, they only have like one unique model in the current setting, and the role of the badass deadpan mechanical comic relief is already fulfilled by the Mechanicus. But it wasn't supposed to be this way. The Iron 10th of the modern era is not what Ferrus Manus had intended. After his death, the 10th Legion came to a fork in the road, a choice, and the tragedy wasn't only that they chose wrong, but in the horrific way they made that decision. Buckle up, because this is not going to be a feel-good video. What does feel good, however, is the fact that Major Minis has officially produced, sold, and sent out over 50,000 models. That is absolutely wild to me. The support you guys continue to give is extremely humbling, and I'll never not appreciate it. To celebrate this milestone, we're running a sale, 30% off store-wide. I don't usually run sales for Major Minis. The prices I've chosen are heavily considered as I factor in wages, costs of goods, office rent, and so on. I also don't believe in those cheap marketing tactics of overvaluing my products, then running constant fire sales. I also have never done a price increase on any of my models despite inflation and the costs steadily rising, because at the moment the business is healthy and I don't need to do that. My point being, this is probably the cheapest the Major Minis will ever be. If you've ever wanted to pick up your own Kitten, or Shark Daddy, or Son of Iron, or maybe something a bit more twisted like the Lord of the Night, or the Sorcerer of Blood, or even the Chaotic Lich Lord, then now is quite literally the best chance. Why stop there? We also have a plethora of Space Lords, as well as our Xenonid range, our Undead Space Egyptian robots, and a couple of cheeky orcs to throw into the mix. There is a ton of models to choose from to either spice up your army and make it your own, create a foundation to build an army from, or you just think it would be sick to paint one of these models, then yeah, go for it. I mean, put it in a cum jar for all I care. Sale runs from today until Friday, so you have all week to get it. Link is below. No code or anything required, everyone gets the discount. Today we'll go over the tragic fall of the Iron Hands, detailing how they went from the most fearsome, interesting, and respected legion to quite literally the most forgettable. Let's get into it. This may sound odd, but the Iron Hands were actually considered to be one of, if not the most fearsome and powerful of all Space Marine legions. Guilliman numbered Ferrus and his legion amongst his dauntless few, that being a handful of legions that if he had by his side, he believed he could take on any threat the galaxy had to offer. Now, whilst this doesn't necessarily mean the dauntless few were better than the other legions, Guilliman considered them to be the most reliable and synergistic. Horus also gasses up Ferrus hard. During the heresy, he spoke to Ferrus's skull and basically said, "Fuck man, if you were on my team, we already would have breached the gates of terror." Probably the greatest indication of the might of the Iron Hands, however, is the fact that despite losing their Primarch and being the most caught out of the three legions on Isstvan, they had the most survivors. They are so fucking tough that after seeing their dad die, they managed to fight through the trap and get thousands of legionnaires to extract into orbit and to escape. They fared better than the Salamanders, who nearly all died, and even better than the Raven Guard, who were able to rally to Corvus and stage a breakout. The Iron 10th are considered to be the toughest and hardest to kill Space Marines out of all the legions, bar the Death Guard. Ferrus himself was a monster of a Primarch. The only Primarchs who had comparable strength would have been Vulcan and maybe Angron. He fought the Emperor when the Emperor came to collect him, and it's said that their battle leveled mountains. The Emperor respected him so much that he had Ferrus as his right-hand man for quite some time and would defer to him for opinions and advice. For example, when Vulcan was discovered, the Emperor and Ferrus watched him fight, and the Emperor asked for Ferrus's opinion on Vulcan. I'm basically trying to set the scene of how awesome the Iron Hands were and how universally highly regarded they were. Like, despite the fact that Vulcan and Corvus still lived, the Iron Hands were seen as the commanding force for the Shattered Legions after Isstvan. That's how awesome they were. However, there was a bit of a cultural problem within the Iron Hands. Their obsession with bionics and attempting to improve themselves by merging with the machine, especially the more extremists like the Iron Fathers. They saw their Primarch with his silver arms and power he got from those arms, hence wished to replicate it. It wasn't too much of an issue before the Horus Heresy, and Ferrus vowed that he would rid himself of his silver arms and show his sons the strength of humanity. However, Ferrus didn't expect to get his head cut off, thus leave the Iron Hands culture up for debate. When Ferrus fought Fulgrim, Ferrus was actually winning. He knew his own strength and he knew that of Fulgrim's. When Ferrus performed an attack that should have overwhelmed Fulgrim, Fulgrim got a big strength boost from the demon within the Layer Blade. He blocked the attack, which surprised Ferrus. It would be like going to stab someone with a sword, only for them to be wearing mithril under their shirt. You were now surprised and overexposed, yet your attack was true and should have won the fight if it wasn't for unexpected bullshit. When Ferrus was killed, the Iron Hands managed to respond with cold logic enhanced by extreme fury. They didn't just all suicide themselves, but went numb and tactically withdrew from Isstvan to live to fight another day. The death of Ferrus changed the Iron Hands profoundly. The Iron Fathers went hardcore into their hate of flesh and began to rapidly augment themselves further with bionics while attempting to suppress their emotions and feelings. But not all was lost. Many Iron Hands retained the noble bearing that they had inherited from their father. They thought bionics were cool, but that the idea that the flesh was weak was a flawed one. These Iron Hands rallied around a singular warrior called Shadrach Medusan, a Terran-born Iron Hand who dreamed of reuniting the scattered, shattered Iron Hands and taking the fight to the traitors, not just scurrying around in the shadows doing petty raids. He wanted to prove that the Iron Hands were not done. So on one side we have a bunch of boring-ass Iron Fathers who quite literally wanted to abandon the heresy and leave the Imperium to wait it out and let it blow over, and then we had the Iron Hands who looked up to Shadrach to be their war leader. The saddest thing about the Iron Fathers' attitude and their obsession with the saying, "the flesh is weak," is that the term was coined as a joke between Vulcan and Ferris. The Salamanders and Iron Hands had just liberated a world during the Great Crusade and killed a shitload of orcs. Ferris joked that his arms were tired from killing so many orcs. Vulcan replied, "The flesh is weak, but deeds endure," which meant that although your physical body is non-permanent and will eventually weaken and fail, what you do with that flesh and the things you achieve can echo for eternity. It was wholesome and humble. However, the Iron Hands just went full autismo on it after Ferris's death, and now basically is saying, humanity is weak, we must become the machine. Like they genuinely think that replacing their dick with a turbo laser, thus editing the Emperor's design, is a great idea. To be fair, that does sound like a pretty good idea. Now yes, having bionics can make a Marine stronger, and the Iron Hands did gain quite a bit of power from their bionic enhancements, but there was always a line. Bionics were not as smooth and versatile as flesh. They slowed you down and were vulnerable to data corruption, EMPs and whatnot. As Shadrach gained more and more power through each successive victory against the traitors, he got the attention of Horus himself after he almost managed to assassinate Horus, Fulgrim and Mortarion in one go. Horus assigned Tybalt Ma, a Sons of Horus captain, with killing Shadrach, as the Iron Hand war leader was the only one who could unite the Shattered Legions and cause a massive issue for the traitors' rearguard. Shadrach constantly outplayed Ma, however there was an even bigger issue for the Iron Hands war leader. The flesh's weak, loving Iron Fathers under his command were sick of Shadrach and his humanity. They believed that he would lead them to extinction and they should instead abandon the war and return to Medusa. They wanted to overthrow him, so using one of Ferris's recovered silver arms, they built a robot Ferris Manus and started worshipping him as the Gorgon reborn. The robot was extremely shit quality. It was basically just tweaking all the time. They would say to it, "Should we overthrow Shadrach?" And then it would like tweak and spaz out and shit. And then they'd be like, "See, Ferris wants us to overthrow Shadrach." So the Iron Fathers summoned Shadrach to a meeting in which they attempted their coup, unveiling their reborn Primarch. Vulcan was actually amongst the Iron Hands at this point as he encountered them on his mission to get to Terra. He was infuriated by the fake Ferris, so he smashed it into pieces with his hammer and then smashed the silver arm, finally letting his brother rest. With this act, the Iron Fathers were shamed, apologized for their folly, and they agreed to unite behind Shadrach. Medusan thought that was it. The Iron Hands were united in purpose and ready to be a legion again, but sadly that wasn't quite the case. Shadrach and Tybalt Ma would eventually have their showdown. Shadrach wanted to attack a Sons of Horus fleet that was blockading the path to Terra. This would allow Vulcan to continue his journey whilst also opening up the rear of the traitor fleet. The battle started off well. Sons of Horus ships had been blown up or taken over by boarding actions. However, due to some warp fuckery, one of the ships that was captured turned back against the Iron Hands and managed to blow up their vanguard, turning the momentum of battle against the Iron Hands. The most logical course of action was to slowly withdraw from here. The Sons of Horus had paid dearly, Vulcan had gotten through the blockade, and the risks were high if they continued to fight. But Shadrach, despite being a legend, was also a prideful man who needed to kill Tybalt Ma. He felt that if he killed Ma, it would prove himself, and from Ma's death would the Iron Tenth be reborn anew. He was also incredibly sleep deprived due to the stress of being war leader, so his judgment wasn't the best. As such, Shadrach ordered a mass boarding action of Ma's ship. 3 Iron Hand vessels would board Ma's ship. However, Org, Shadrach's second in command and his closest friend, who was also an Iron Father, advised him not to. But Shadrach was like, "I'm fucking doing it, follow my orders." As Org still clung on to the Iron Father way, he sabotaged Shadrach's Vox communication, as well as the boarding torpedoes of the other Iron Hand ships, so only Shadrach and a few of his squads managed to board. From here, they tried to fight their way through the ship, but were cornered and captured. Shadrach's men executed in front of him. Some Iron Hands tried to lead a rescue mission for Shadrach, but Org had them killed. He then took command of the fleet and withdrew the Iron Hands. Any Iron Hand captain who tried to protest was either captured or killed. The Iron Tenth would endure, but they would be devoid of humanity, honor, or even a soul. Shadrach faced Ma, asking him for a duel. Ma simply said, "Mate, I don't give a fuck about a duel or honor or a showdown. Horus told me to kill you, so I'm just following orders." He then had Shadrach's head cut off, ending the tale of the hero of the Shattered Legions. The Iron Hands would mostly withdraw from the heresy heresy, waiting it out. They set up an Iron Council made up of Iron Fathers who basically decreed that the flesh is weak. The reason for the heresy was the weakness of humanity, so the humanity within them must be expunged. They forged a closer bond with the Mechanicum whilst isolating themselves from other chapters. They of course remained loyal as well as an effective fighting force for the Imperium, but now they are basically put to the periphery. Like sure, they still have good lore, but no one really knows or cares much about it. I can't remember the last time I saw anyone post about their Iron Hands army or saw a cool lore excerpt of the Iron Hands. It's wild because the Iron Hands are actually such a highlight during the heresy. They steal every scene they're in. It's their hyper-cynical, hyper-logical attitude paired with their unbreakable wills and a touch of comedy that makes them so awesome. To their credit, their current chapter master, Cardan Stronos, is attempting to undo the flat, boring Iron Hands culture, expanding the Iron Council to allow more than just Iron Fathers, declaring that their humanity and emotions are no longer weaknesses, but actually strength, and just being an all-round badass. He also despises the Necrons, as he sees them as the cold, mechanical, soulless machines that he's trying to stop the Iron Hands from becoming. But it is just a little too late. If Ferrus was alive to see the Iron Hands at the current setting, even with Stronos, he would be mortified. The tragedy of the Iron Hands is that they had a choice: use the combined power of the machine and flesh to honor the legacy of Ferrus and remain one of the most steadfast defenders of the Imperium. But not only did they turn away from this, but they did so by breaking their oaths to Shadrach and letting him die, before then literally murdering any Iron Hand within the Legion that had too much humanity. And this was plan B to sacrilegiously attempting a fucked up cybernetic resurrection of Ferrus. Like, the writers quite literally killed off every single likable Iron Hand, leaving only the boring turbo douchebags remaining. It's no surprise that people weren't very interested afterwards. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up a Major Mini. The 30% off discount will run till Friday, and then that's it. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more Iron content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.